Alright, as you know, my videos are primarily focused on low-budget recording and musical equipment, but the least expensive but most valuable thing you can do is learn recording techniques so you can use your gear to its full potential. So when you're starting out, one of the most difficult things to do is get a great live drum sound. There are a lot of factors that go into it, and I know when I started out, it took me a long time before I could get a sound I was happy with. The most important thing is a great drummer, followed by a great room, probably followed by a great drum kit. But, you know, those are all variables, so you have to work with them how you can. But what you can learn now is drum recording techniques, miking techniques. So I'm going to go through a few different techniques and show you how they sound. Alright, I'm starting with an XY pair, or coincident pair, or coincident pair, however you want to say it. The reason it's called this is because the capsules of the microphones should be as close to one point as possible, which means as close to each other as possible. I have a little space between them, but it doesn't cause any phasing issues if the distance is minimal. So one thing you'll notice is the XY pair is not aimed directly at the bass drum from the front of the bass drum. The reason for this is if you put it right in front of the bass drum, the snare drum will sit off to the side in the stereo image, which can be distracting if it's not what you're going for in a mix. So you want to line it up as if there were a line going through the snare drum and the bass drum, and so that'll allow both of them to sit in the center of the stereo image. So here's how it sounds. Alright, the spaced pair works along the same principle as the XY pair, in that it's a two-mic technique for one source. Whenever you have two mics on one source, you have to deal with phase issues, which is the cancellation of certain frequencies when one source is hitting two mics at a slightly different time. The XY deals with that by having the capsules in one space, so it's one source hitting two microphones at the same time. This spaced pair works with the 3-to-1 rule, which says if you have the distance between the microphone and the source, you have to have 3 times that distance between the two microphones to avoid phasing issues. It can be more than that, but less than that, and you start to get into phase trouble. So you can see here, I have the two mics about a foot in front of the hi-hat and ride, respectively, and about 5 or 6 feet apart, so there's no phasing issues. So here's how the spaced pair sounds. Alright, the Recorderman is a very simple setup. You have this mic coming straight down to the middle of the snare drum. This one also towards the snare drum, but over the drummer's right shoulder from behind them. You just have to make sure that both mics are equidistant from the bass drum and the snare drum. You can use 2 drumsticks as a general measurement for a good distance, and it puts them in the right place in the stereo image. So here's how the Recorderman setup sounds. Alright, now for the Glyn Johns setup. I think this is where the Recorderman got the idea for his. It's similar in that it still has this same microphone aimed straight down towards the center of the snare, but instead of over the shoulder, it has this other mic coming over the floor tom, aimed towards the hi-hat and snare drum. And usually this is done also with a close mic on the snare drum and another one on the bass drum. I have an SM57 and a AKG D12. Yeah, so this is how the Glyn Johns setup sounds. Alright, so the last technique I'm going over is close miking. There's less of a specific rule. Basically, the idea is just to put microphones on individual elements rather than picking up the kit as a whole. You use the overheads to pick up a decent stereo image, however you want them set up, whether it's X, Y, or spaced pair, and then put mics on tom, snare, kick, whatever you feel needs it. This is used in a lot of commercial rock music and anything that needs those kind of rolling toms that go from one side to the other on headphones, and we've all heard it. So what I've done here is a spaced pair, just like before, over the ride and hi-hat and crash, and then I've got kick mic, snare drum mic, and then I've got one mic picking up between the two toms that picks those up, and a floor tom mic. So yeah, you can pan them how you want. You have to watch out for phase issues a lot with these kind of setups, but it works for certain kinds of music. So here's how this specific close miking setup sounds.